My story is a bit of a long one and quite hard to tell, so strap yourself in. My grandmother passed away a few years ago, and when she did, I inherited her house. I agreed with my family that I would go over and live in it for a little while, and that I would do the odd repairs to the place and clear out some junk before selling it on and using the money for purchasing my own home. It was a really odd house that was out in the suburbs of Mississippi, so it wasn't exactly rural. But folk around there were quite private people, and if you were not from the area, they were not exactly the welcoming sort. Most people would just avoid you, and if you went over to say hi or introduce yourself, they would just point blank ignore you. They would be rude to most people, but for the people there, it's just the standard experience. I used to stay in this house a heck of a lot as a child when I would have sleepovers with Grammy. My grandfather passed away while I was a baby, so it was only ever her there. I was a kid with a ton of energy, so I would help her out with the garden. She would teach me to cook, and I would toil over the pots and pans while she gave me directions, because her hands were becoming more and more useless by the day. I visited every so often now and then, even well into adulthood, and I would stay for a week at a time. She would give me a checklist of things that needed to be done, and I would just get to it. I enjoyed it. It made me feel like a man and like I was needed. I was not doing it for anything but my own sense of good and to make sure that she was well taken care of. When she passed away from a nasty fall down the stairs, it broke my heart. She was left lying there for days before anyone even found her. I was told that the fall did not instantly kill her. I think her leg broke, and she laid there in agony for a day or two before she finally passed away. She did not even have the energy to scream anymore. It still makes me feel sick to think about. I still feel guilty for not being there. I know it's not my fault, and there's not anything I could ever really have done, but I still get angry at myself all the same. It's irrational, but I don't know. No one really knew what caused the fall. I paid for her to have a chairlift fitted inside her home, but even still, it was rare for her to go up the stairs. She mostly slept on the couch downstairs, and she had a toilet fitted downstairs too, so she never needed to go up there if she did not want to. There were no signs of anything on the stairs breaking or being damaged. I guess it's just one of those things. So, there I was. I figured I could maybe get everything done in a week or so. I had my pickup truck waiting outside, and aside from things like family heirlooms and photographs and such, I was going to take all of it into town and either pay to dump it somewhere around there or just donate it all. Clothes and DVDs and whatnot I figured would be pretty easy to get someone to take off of my hands for free. I discovered quite a few things out about Grammy while I was there, sorting through all of her lifelong possessions that I never knew before. Most notably, I found out that she was really into the occult. At least, at some point in her life she was anyway. She had Ouija boards, these special ritual-type candles. She had multiple books on the subjects and guides for different rituals. She had various trinkets with inscriptions and runes carved into them. None of it really made all that much sense to me, and like I said, growing up, I never saw any of this stuff. So she was either into this before I was born, or she just hid it from me. There was a book that caught my interest, and I actually got super distracted just reading it. I think I read it for like an hour, just trying to procrastinate doing any real work before I snapped myself out of it and put it back down. I don't know, I guess I just wanted to delay the work as long as possible. I felt like while it was still unfinished, I could stay here and linger in the memories and maybe pretend that she was still alive. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I can't remember the exact title of the guide, but it was something about thin places. That and the title really caught my eye. There was a ton of stuff in there that I did not understand, but it talked about how the earth has lots of doorways. The explanation was to think of the earth as a house, and that down the street there were other houses. It said that in every house there are multiple exits. You have the front door, the back door, Then you have exits only for emergencies, like big windows you can fit through, and depending on where you live, a fire escape. It went on to talk about Earth just being one plane of reality, and that there are places on Earth that are thin, where the gap between this reality and another one are incredibly small, and that with the right know-how, you could easily breach it and pass through unharmed. It said that only in these places on Earth can realities be passed through. Then it had a guide on how to do it, but it really just looked like a load of old mumbo-jumbo. It gave like a list of places, and then a guide on how to detect if where you live has a thin barrier, which sounded like absolute BS. And then it went on to give a ritual and what trinkets to use and yada yada yada. I put the book down, and by this point, I went to go and do something useful with my time. At first I was interested, and by now I was dismissing the entire thing. A few days passed by. I forgot all about the book, and I was just looking at photographs my grandma had stored. I saw a lot of ones that she never ever showed me. I thought I had seen every single photo ever taken of my grandfather by now, but apparently not. Apparently there was still more she had never showed me. She had Polaroid photos that were a little scuffed up, and that made it hard to make out the background, but there were a lot of her and my grandfather. I remember one of them had candles in the background, which I think made the camera out of focus a little on their faces, and they were both wearing these necklaces with a red gemstone. There were a couple of these, but then another one with the lights on, all of the candles blown out, and then it was just my grandmother. This red stone that was on her neck, it had a crack inside of it. There was a brown smear in the center of the candles, and what looked like a little door on the wall. You know, one of those tiny crawl space ones that are at the bottom of a wall? One of those, but I could see that it was upstairs, inside the bedroom, which was, weird. I had never seen that little door before in all of the times I had stayed there. I was sleeping in that room right now, and I knew that the door was not there. I guess they must have removed it and filled in the space at some point, or just boarded over it, I guess. Fast forward another few days, and I am almost done with everything. I am absolutely exhausted at this point, and I go to take a nap up in my grandmother's room. The wallpaper in that room was peeling off, and so I had to peel the rest off myself, and then paint the walls so that the place did not look a mess. I found some weird symbols that had been drawn in black marker right underneath it. It wasn't anything I understood, and it looked really old too. It was all really weathered and barely visible at this point. I dozed off almost instantly, and I had a really intense dream. Once I woke up again, it was already dark outside, and I was like, shit, I wasted the rest of my day. I decided that there was not much else I could do, so I went to go and get a glass of water from downstairs and then just relax. But I noticed something before I even got out of the room. Underneath the wall where I had ripped up the wallpaper from, there was something there now. Not just the symbol, but right near the floor. It was a square shape, barely big enough to fit a human maybe. There was this little door nestled into the wall. I was freaking the hell out because I knew this was not there before. I had forgotten all about it by this point, but looking back, it was almost the exact same as in the Polaroid that my grandmother took. The door was made out of wood and was falling to bits. Pieces of paint were just flaking off. But I had this feeling inside my gut, this feeling that I had to open up this door and see what was inside. It was like the door was calling to me. I don't know how to describe it, but I was actually hearing a faint sound. You know, like how when wind becomes violent and whistles against glass windows? It was like that, only a lot softer, and it seemed to be accompanied by the sound of unintelligible whispers. It was in both of my ears and would not stop. It was like right in my ears, right next to me. I was basically fighting against my own mind. I kept getting thoughts inside my own head that were not even mine, trying to barter with me and convince me to go and check out the door. Saying things like, we have to check it out. It wouldn't hurt. It's okay. We could close it right after. We don't have to go any further. just open it up and see what's inside. Once we see what's inside, that's it. It's all over. And I would be there, trying to get rid of these thoughts, to try and shake them out of my head, but it's like I could not fight them and bat them away. Before I even knew it, my body was just moving on autopilot, and I was basically a passenger inside my own body. And then once the door was opened, and I could feel this cold flow of air coming from it and making my entire body shiver, the thoughts inside my head started talking once again. They were saying, "We can't stop here. What if we just poked our head inside, just a little bit? We don't have to go any further than that. We just need to see." And without even thinking, I did just that. I could not really see much of anything, if I'm being honest. My eyes were watering from the cold breeze, and my entire body just felt cold. But not just from the temperature either. My body felt empty, almost, as if all of my thoughts and feelings were just gone. The only thing I could think inside of my head was about this door. I could see a glimmer of light, and it was blinking. And then the thoughts in my head became, let's just see what this light is. We're still inside the house, so we can still just crawl back. It will only take 5 seconds, and then we are done. We don't want to have an unhappy house buyer, do we? Coming across some unexpected little door with some junk and rats inside. And before I knew it, I was shuffling along in this cramped space, until I eventually came to another door, almost the exact same as the first one. It was partially ajar, and so I just pushed it and stepped right outside. When I got outside the door, I was in the exact same bedroom again, which made no sense at all. It was daylight outside. Around 8 hours had probably passed by my estimates. The birds were chirping. Everything was fine. I figured that maybe I had some messed up, intense metaphysical dream that I didn't realize I had even woken up from. Except, that didn't make sense, and I figured this out pretty quickly too. The bedroom that I was in was now in pristine condition. Aside from the bare wall with markings on it, the bed was this luxurious queen-size bed and looked brand new. It wasn't the old crappy thing that I was sleeping on. The paint in the room was no longer peeling and looked to have been touched up recently. Even downstairs, there was no trace of any remaining junk lying around. The fridge had a full stock of food, which was impossible because I had been living off nothing but aged cheese and crackers while I stayed there just to save some money. The house smelled as if someone had just cooked a fresh breakfast, but there was no one in the house at all. And there was nothing in the counter to suggest that food had been made. Everything was packed away and cleaned. I decided that I would go and get some fresh air outside and try and figure out this confusing mess. My heart dropped when I got outside for multiple reasons too. The first one was that my pickup truck was just gone. It was a bit of an old beater, but I guess some asshole figured they could get a few dollars for the scrap metal. I started walking down the street as I called my mother for help on my cell phone because I had no other way to get back home. As I walked down the street, I noticed that all of the other houses were in pieces. The only house on that street in good working order was my grandmother's. There was usually kids playing ball games in the street on sunny days like that, especially since it was around spring break, but there was no sign of anyone at all. There were cars in the driveways that had all of the wheels removed, and the vehicles were just propped up on cinder blocks. There were gardens that looked like jungles, with grass almost coming up to my waist. Windows were partially cracked, curtains were yellowed and moldy. It was like I had stepped into an alternate reality. I never got a hold of my mother on the phone. My phone could not get any signal whatsoever, and the house phone was the exact same deal. I just kept walking down the street to try and figure out what the hell was going on. I felt weird the whole entire time. I had this pounding headache that just would not ever stop. Every single step that I took down that street, I just had a thump, thump, thump constantly. My body still felt cold, despite the sun and the heat outside. I was almost shivering the whole time I was walking. I still felt empty. I decided to walk up to a neighbor's house and knocked on the door. They used to check on my grandmother now and then when I could not be in town and she had ill health. Betty, my neighbor, was called. The second that I knocked on the door, I could see shadows in the windows, not just in the front room, but every single window in that house. What looked like two tall people standing in them, moving around, making weird gestures. That sound in my head was coming back, the wind and the whispers. Combined with my headache, it was driving me crazy. No one was answering the door. I tried to get close to the windows and inspect the shadows, but when I did, they would suddenly just duck down to the floor and be completely out of sight. So I walked away, and then they came back. And then I noticed that these shadows were in the windows of every house, not just that one. Every single house in that street had them. I stepped back because now I was shocked, and I heard the mail slot in the door fly open. These were really old houses, by the way, built early 20th century or so, I think, so they all had mail slots in the door rather than having mailboxes standing in the yard. I heard someone shout out from it. All they said was, "Go away. Go now, quickly." So I just started running. I ran all the way down the street, but no matter how quickly I ran, it seemed like the street was becoming longer and seemed to go on forever and ever. I was sweating hard by this point and sprinting at my top speed, but when I looked to check behind me after I heard a door snap open, I noticed that I was still in the same exact spot as if I had been running on the spot. It was a person. They were wearing an old and tattered cardigan and some gray, stained clothes. They ran towards me, and I tried to turn and run, but I could not get away. Before I even realized it, they were on top of me, grabbing me, shaking me by the shoulders, and all I could hear coming from them were these muffled mumbles. Because this person, they did not have a face. They did not have eyes or a mouth or anything. Where they should be, everything was just smoothed over with skin. They never hurt me. They just kept on shaking me. By this point, I wasn't really paying attention to anything except the person on top of me, so I don't know how it happened or even how quickly, but I noticed that the sky had started to become much darker. It was basically nighttime now, and the only thing giving us any light was the occasional street lamp that was flickering and the moon. This person just gave up. They got off of me and then ran to the middle of the street. The doors to all of the other houses began to open up, and those shadows that I saw in the window, they were physical now. They looked like actual people, still all black like shadows, but they looked like they weren't just 2D castings anymore. And now they were making their way outside. I just ran back to my grandmother's house. I was so frightened I did not know what to do. The last thing I remember seeing before I got inside were all of these physical shadows surrounding this smooth-faced person. They all just kind of converged on that person, going from being physical to more like an amorphous blob. And when they formed back into physical people, the smooth-faced person, they were just gone. There was not even a trace of them, no clothes, no nothing. The house was fully lit up when I got back inside. I did not even have time to think or catch my breath, because there was someone right there in the kitchen, washing up and whistling a tune. They were wearing one of my grandmother's old knitted cardigans, and they were moving around like they did not have a care in the world. I called out to them, and when they turned around, I could see that it was my grandmother. She looked the same as the last time I saw her alive, except her legs and her arms were working now. She could move. She was actually doing things and didn't have to just sit in her chair and sob and curse her own body for being useless. She immediately greeted me with a smile and called me over for a hug. She sounded different. I gave her a hug and she squeezed me so tight it was hard to breathe. I was sobbing. I couldn't believe she was here. I couldn't believe that she was okay. Her voice just sounded different though, and I could not get this thought out of my head. It kept coming back to me again and again, ruining the moment. Her voice was a lot more coarse and rough than it ever was, and she was calling me by my full name too. My entire life, my grandmother had only ever called me by a specific nickname that only she ever called me. I asked what was going on and how this was even happening, and she practically ignored me. I told her I was scared, and she seemed to get visibly annoyed while listening to me speak, and suddenly burst out with a, "That doesn't matter anymore." She took a few breaths, and while I was silent, she said, "Please, dear, there is someone that I want you to meet." She gestured to just beyond her in the living room, and what I saw made me freeze in fear. This thing stepped from the living room into the kitchen. It was this giant 7-foot man made completely out of shadow, and it had to duck just to get through the door. Every time it took a step, I felt it in my body. I felt my body shake, but nothing in the room actually physically did. It went and stood by my grandmother, and she spoke to me again. She said, "This is your grandfather. Isn't it so nice to finally meet him after all of this time?" I saw her smile twist into a different expression that I could not explain, and she just started laughing like she couldn't even control it and hold it back. I just ran. I ran for the upstairs bedroom, but once I got near the top of the steps, I felt something grip my ankle and pull me back down the stairs. My face hit every single step on the way back down, and my nose was bleeding by the end. It was that giant shadow man. His limbs were so long, he barely even had to stretch to grab me. Looking down at him from the steps, he looked even bigger than he already was in the kitchen. He dragged me by my ankle right into the kitchen, and I could see shadows dancing past the window just outside the house, just like I saw them when I walked down the street. By this point, I was being pinned to the floor, and this gigantic shadow man was holding me so that my arms and my legs were stretched as far as they would go, in like a star shape, and I was pinned to the ground. Then the door flies open, and those same physical shadow people I saw outside started flooding in. They all stood around me, and my grandmother was just watching from the kitchen. She was still laughing, and in between the laughs, she managed to mutter out a, "Welcome home." And before I knew it, right in front of me, all of these shadow people became just a random blob of shadow, and they seemed to just enter through my mouth, and I could not close it. It was hanging wide open against my will, and I could just see this endless beam of shadow just shooting towards me, and it felt like I could not breathe. It felt like I was being waterboarded. I got one short, sharp breath every so often, so I never passed out, but it felt like torture. I don't know how long this went on for, but I remember my vision just going black. When I could finally see again, I was on the floor of my grandmother's bedroom. I had missed calls from my mother about someone wanting to see the house already. I shit you not, almost an entire week had passed by. I don't know how. I had no recollection of any of those days. For me, it only seemed like hours at most. That door in the wall, it was not even there the next time I checked. The wood panel where it previously was had boards nailed into it, old and makeshift ones, like they had been there for a long time. The very first second that I could, I made sure to cover that wall again. I got the house ready as quickly as I could, and I slept downstairs from then on. The house eventually sold, and I never told anyone about what I experienced until right now. Did I lose my mind? Was the stuff I read about in that book real? Or did my grief just conjure up something that I could not explain? I was kinda hoping for some answers, but I'm not sure I will ever get any. To this day, I do not know how to explain what happened to me, or how so much time passed by in just a few hours. Okay, so for my story, I will have to paint a picture of the location to give you a sense of what made this so creepy. I was in West Texas. The houses stand about a mile apart from each other. My house is a long driveway that meets the main highway. I stand next to this highway every single morning, waiting for the bus to take me to school. This story took place when I'm already home now. It was in 5th grade. I never really had any friends over at my house due to the distance away. Today is different. I am playing with some action figures in my room alone. I suddenly hear a knock at the front door. My mom goes to answer. After a moment, she pokes her head into my room, and she tells me, "There are some kids from school to see you, Anon." I'm way too excited to realize how unusual this is. I race to the front door. I see these kids that I've never met before. I will never forget how they looked. It's a boy and a girl. Today, I would recognize their clothing as something like boarding school clothes, maybe. Very old-timey style, this coarse brown material, old-fashioned haircuts, the works. The first thing I ask them is if I know them from school. They give me no response. Then I ask them their names, but they give me no response again. Finally, I ask them, "Who are you?" Nothing. Not even a word. They don't even move. They just keep staring at me. I don't even remember them blinking. I should be spooked. I should be really scared, but I'm too damn excited just to have company. I tell them to wait right there, that I will go and get my toys. I run to my room and pick up my action figures and then run back out the door. When I get back there, the kids are gone, like seriously vanished. You can see for miles around from my property, so I would easily see them running away. Again, this is West Texas, so it's a lot of flat land, kind of like this picture. Only my house was not run down, and I did have a couple of small trees around it, but still, I should have been able to see them. I run around the back, thinking the kids must have gone behind the house. It's the only thing that really made any sense. Again, it's virtually flat with no trees. I can see a long distance. There is not a soul there. I run back around and look down the driveway that ends at the highway. There is nobody there. I run down to the highway and look down both sides of the road. It's empty. I sit on the porch, confused for a long while. I wait for maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer. Those kids never show back up. I eventually go back inside. My mom has been inside, cleaning and cooking while I've been gone. I tell her what happened. She's so busy that she just shrugs it off. Fast forward to years later, I bring it back up to her. I'm like, "Do you remember that one day those kids showed up and then just disappeared?" I don't even mention what the kids look like, but my mom knows right away. She tells me, "I actually thought those kids were really creepy. They were dressed up in old-timey clothes, and they had this really weird way of talking." I never heard them speak, so I ask her what they talked like English robots or something. I still to this day do not have an explanation. There is nowhere those kids could have been hiding. Even if it was a prank, they would have had to have found those old get-ups and walk who knows how long just to get to my house. Okay, so this is my weird UFO experience. I was out in the woods with some friends about to start a bonfire for a party that we were throwing that night. Out of nowhere comes this loud humming sound. It honestly seemed more like a vibration than a sound. We start scrambling to put the fire out and get out of there, as we were kids with liquor at the time, thinking, this is cops or state game, so we are going to be screwed. The vibrating sound starts getting way more intense. As we were bailing, I look around, and then I look up to see some bizarre stuff. Hovering above the trees, maybe 5 to 10 feet above the ground, was this thing. I could make out the exact shape of the craft. It was a little after dusk, but this was mostly due to being somewhat hypnotized by these 3 lava lamp-looking dome lights arranged triangularly on the bottom of the craft. They were lit up, but they did not seem to cast light, or at least not enough to light the trees up. The color was strange. It seemed more like a strange thick liquid was inside of them. A creamy, beige-like color with highlights of green and purple. The craft was definitely no more than 30 to 40 feet across. It made out an edge against the sky as I was looking up towards it. I want to say circular, but the whole thing took place in seconds. I looked up, said what the fuck was that, and then I felt this adrenaline, and it was like time stopped when seeing the thing. And then after that, I got the hell out of there.